Most divers go to Malpelo dreaming about hammerheads, whale sharks, and walls of fish so thick they block out the blue and the sun. We came all the way to this remote rock in the Pacific and somehow ended up searching for a fish smaller than my finger. I'm Don, and this is DiveWise. And today, we're visiting Malpelo, one of the wildest dive destinations on Earth. But on this dive, the real treasure was hiding inside the barnacles. And honestly, that might be what made it perfect. Malpelo is not really an island in the way that most people imagine an island. There are no beaches, no palm trees, no resort, and no easy way to casually visit. It is a steep volcanic rock sitting about 500 kilometers or 310 miles off the Colombian Pacific coast. To dive there, you do not just arrive, you commit. You come across open ocean by liveaboard, sleep on the boat, follow the dive schedule, watch the weather, and build your days around whatever conditions the Pacific gives you. That isolation is part of what makes Malpelo feel so wild. It is also part of what makes the life there so unusual. Endemic life means a species naturally lives in one place and nowhere else in the world. So if a fish is endemic to Malpelo, this remote rock is not just somewhere it visits. It is its home. Its life is tied to this reef, this current, and this specific corner of the Pacific. That is what makes endemic animals so special. Malpelo can have animals like this because it is extremely isolated. It's like a desert in the oasis of the ocean. It sits far offshore, surrounded by deep, open ocean. So some animals living there can become separated from similar animals elsewhere. Generation after generation, they adapt to this exact place. The rock, the current, the cracks, the barnacles, and of course, the occasional food passing by. Over enough time, they become their own distinct species. At Malpelo, the rock itself helps create that identity. There are steep walls, cracks, ledges, barnacles, coral, surge, current, and tiny protected spaces where small animals can survive. The moving water brings food across the rock, turning the cracks, the ledges, barnacles, and coral growth into an habitat instead of just a scenery. And if you slow down enough, it is full of tiny animals that make Malpelo feel like Malpelo. And that was why, on this dive, some of us had one of the strangest pieces of gear they can bring to a place famous for big animals. A magnifying glass at Malpelo. Let that sink in. Not for checking your dive computer, not for inspecting your gear, for looking into barnacles, cracks, and tiny holes in the reef. Because somewhere in that volcanic texture were two of the small animals we're hoping to find. The Malpelo barnacle blenny and the Malpelo clingfish. A hammerhead can swim through, a whale shark can casually pass by. But these little fish live there. And for a moment, our backs were turned to the big stuff to focus on the small stuff. And these small things are ultimately the island's identity, which meant our very serious remote ocean expedition had temporarily become an underwater game of hide and seek with fish smaller than the size of a paperclip. Our dive started the way many Malpelo dives start, with everyone ready for something huge to happen. And of course, negative dives, where we enter the water and go straight down. And we do this to get off the surface and meet down below with our team where there's a little bit less current. You drop straight into the blue Pacific water. Get organized, check the group, and immediately feel that this is not a gentle little reef dive. The rock is steep, rugged, and alive with movement. Fish are everywhere. The background is depth, current, rock, and blue water that could hide almost anything. As divers, we knew the best plan was to stay together, keep our position, and let the dive unfold instead of trying to force the encounter. That matters in a place like Malpelo, where chasing the big animals usually just turns into a loud, bubble-blowing disappointment. But this dive had a different kind of hunt. Instead of swimming into the blue, looking for sharks, we instead started looking toward and inspecting the rocks. Not casually, I mean really inspecting it. The kind where your dive buddy stops moving because they are staring at a dead barnacle with the intensity of someone who has just discovered a great treasure. And then suddenly, the barnacle looks back and blinks. That is the magic of the Malpelo barnacle blenny. It is tiny, only about 5 centimeters or 2 inches long. It lives in empty barnacles and small tubes in the rocky reef. So most of what you see is the face watching the current from a tiny doorway. These blennies feed on small drifting animals, so a hole in the rock is shelter and a feeding station. Honestly, it's a pretty good real estate strategy. Who else is gonna use those barnacles? It has ocean view, constant room service, minimal commuting, and because this barnacle blenny is known only from Malpelo, that tiny little face suddenly feels much more important. It is a small fish that tells you something about the island. Our group fully committed to the bit. We had crossed hundreds of kilometers of open ocean to reach one of the sharkiest places on the planet. And now, here we are hovering over the reef, taking turns looking through the magnifying glass. There is something deeply funny about that. You spend years building dive experience, training for current, and learning to handle remote conditions. Then your proudest moment is pointing to a hole like, there he is. I found the barnacle blenny. It's right here. And it's so tiny, you can barely see it without a magnifying glass. Then there's the Malpelo clingfish, which was another tiny prize. The clingfish are named for the way that they can hold onto hard surfaces. Many have a suction disc formed from modified fins which help them stay attached in surge and current. And they particularly like to hide in urchins. In fact, the only place we could find them is surrounded by urchins, so you're not getting too close to them. The Malpelo clingfish is small too, reaching about 4 centimeters or 1.5 inches. It lives on those rock surfaces, often tucked into small protected spaces surrounded by urchins. So finding one is not exactly a casual glance situation. You gotta really look for them. You have to slow down. You have to look in all the awkward places. You have to accept that your dive has become a very expensive underwater scavenger hunt. Every few minutes, someone would find something small, and the mood of the dive would shift. Not in the way it shifts when a shark appears. In fact, it was a very real situation. One of my dive buddies was looking very deeply into cracks while a hammerhead approached him right from behind. But instead, in those moments, it's the little victory of finding those things in the cracks. Go away, those hammerheads. Go away, whale shark. We've had enough of you. Time to look for the endemic stuff. A tiny fish in a tiny space on a remote island surrounded by an ocean that feels impossibly large. The contrast is a joke, and also the point. Malpelo is not special because big animals pass through it. It is special because the whole system works. The rock, the current, the barnacles, the coral, the holes, the fish, the sharks, and everything in between. The big animals make you look outward. The endemic animals make you look closer. And then the reef becomes the story. And by the way, if you're enjoying this video, now's a great time to like and subscribe. This channel is all about scuba diving stories, dive adventures, and underwater encounters that bring you closer to the ocean. But getting back to our dive, the shallow areas had texture everywhere, from barnacles, coral growth, to rough volcanic ledges full of fish. A unique environment I haven't seen in many places. The headline animals were still incredible, but the small endemic life gave the place a fingerprint. The smallest animals may have helped me understand Malpelo better than the biggest ones. The sharks show you the scale of the place. The endemic fish show you the identity of the place. They remind you that isolation does not just make a destination hard to reach, it also shapes life. After all that distance, weather, waiting, boat schedule, one of the best memories was a group of experienced divers laughing underwater because someone found a tiny face in a barnacle. Friends gathered around a rock in the middle of the Pacific, passing around magnifying glasses, completely invested in a fish most people would swim past without even noticing. Yes, we want hammerheads and whale sharks, and of course the walls of fish. But the deeper reward is learning to care about the whole thing, everything there. The famous animals and the hidden ones. The things you came for and the things you did not know you were supposed to notice. We still had to finish the dive properly. We watched our depth, watched our breathing gas, stayed with the group, and followed our dive plan. Even when the mood is light, Malpelo is still a remote, serious place to dive, and things can go wrong very quickly. But when I think back on that dive, I remember the little reef faces, the barnacles, the jokes between friends, and the feeling that Malpelo had quietly revealed one of its better secrets to us. Malpelo is famous for the big stuff, and it deserves that reputation. But sometimes, the best story is hiding in the smallest possible places. The more you know, the more you'll love and protect the ocean. Until next time.